It was 11:42 at night when Leah Morgan locked the doors of the Trinity Square Gallery. Rain fell hard over Queen Street, flooding the gutters and painting the pavement in silver light. She pulled her hood tight, tucked her sketchbook under her arm, and started walking toward her car, parked 2 blocks away. She never made it. By morning, her phone was found cracked beside a curb. Her keys were lying near a drain. There were no witnesses, no footprints, and no struggle. The camera that should have shown her path home froze for exactly 6 seconds, then resumed with an empty frame. In those 6 seconds, Leah Morgan vanished. Her mother, Elaine, reported her missing before sunrise. She told police her daughter never disappeared, never missed a call, never broke routine. The officer wrote down her words, but his eyes said he did not believe her. For 12 long years, that half-minute of missing footage was all anyone had, until a renovation crew, more than a decade later, tore up a concrete floor in a quiet Toronto neighborhood and uncovered what Leah's family had been searching for all along. So, before we go deeper into this case, do one thing. Subscribe, follow, and stay until the end, because what happened to Leah Morgan is not just another story. It is a truth that was buried alive. The call came in at 7:34 on a cold Saturday morning. Detective Colin Mercer sat behind his desk, sipping coffee that had long gone bitter, when the dispatcher's voice came through. A missing person, young woman, last seen near Queen Street West. Report filed by her mother early that morning. Mercer had heard hundreds of stories like it. Most ended within 24 hours. A misunderstanding, a night out gone wrong, a lover's argument. But this one was different. The attached note caught his attention. Phone found broken, keys recovered. Last contact at 11:42 p.m. He stopped reading there. Something about it did not feel like a simple disappearance. By 8 o'clock, Mercer was standing outside the Trinity Square Gallery. The rain had stopped, but puddles still glistened under a gray sky. The alley where Leah Morgan was last seen had been cordoned off. 2 patrol officers moved slowly, sweeping their flashlights across wet concrete, searching for anything out of place. Leah's car, a small silver hatchback, was still parked 2 blocks away. Doors locked. Purse untouched on the passenger seat, wallet, identification, and money all inside. Her cracked phone lay sealed in an evidence bag. Only her fingerprint was visible on the edge of the screen. Nothing else. At 8:45, her mother arrived. Elaine Morgan. Pale, trembling, still in the clothes she had worn the day before, she clutched her daughter's jacket to her chest as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. "She never just leaves," Elaine said softly. "Leah always calls me when she finishes work. Always." Mercer asked when they last spoke. "Yesterday afternoon," Elaine said. "She said she had a late shift and would go straight home after. She was tired, but she was fine." Her eyes filled with tears. She promised she would call. By mid-morning, Detective Aisha Patel joined the scene. Younger than Mercer, but precise and quick. She studied the layout of the alley, then pointed to a black security camera mounted above a back door. "That one should have seen everything," she said. "It didn't," Mercer replied. It froze for 6 seconds. Then came back on. She was gone. Inside the gallery, the air smelled faintly of paint and cleaning solution. The lights still hummed softly from the night before. Leah's time card showed she had clocked out at 11:41. Her final transaction appeared at 9:27. Everything in the room was orderly. Nothing broken, nothing missing. On the counter sat her sketchbook, open to a charcoal drawing of a faceless woman fading into darkness. Mercer stared at it longer than he meant to. It looked like something unfinished, like a message that stopped halfway. By afternoon, police canvassed the neighborhood. Store owners remembered the rain. One mentioned a young woman hurrying past with her hood up. Another recalled hearing a car door slam somewhere nearby. No one could describe the vehicle. There were no screams, no struggle, no sound that stood out against the storm. At sunset, Mercer returned to the alley alone. The yellow tape flapped in the wind. Rainwater collected in the cracks of the pavement. He imagined her steps, her breath visible in the cold, the moment she turned a corner that no camera could see. Then nothing. Just silence. He looked down the street and whispered to himself, "This one is not coming back." He did not know it yet, but that sentence would haunt him for more than a decade. By Sunday morning, the city already knew her name. Posters with Leah Morgan's face hung on bus stops and cafe windows. The local news showed her photograph beside the headline, "Art Student Missing After Late Shift." People began to whisper about the girl who vanished in the rain. Detective Colin Mercer watched the first broadcast from his desk at the precinct. He did not like the way reporters smiled between segments, turning someone's nightmare into entertainment. Still, the attention helped. Calls began to pour in. Sightings, tips, the usual noise. Most of it went nowhere. A man swore he saw her on a streetcar near Dundas. A woman claimed she looked like a hitchhiker outside Mississauga. Every lead ended in the same place, nowhere. By noon, Mercer had a wall of printed tips and photographs, each one a dead end. Detective Aisha Patel focused on the digital trail. Leah's phone stopped transmitting at 11:43 in the evening, 1 minute after she left the gallery. The last app she opened was her music player, a playlist called Late Walk Home. It ran for 7 songs. The final track ended exactly 19 minutes after the signal cut out. Patel replayed security footage from nearby buildings, frame by frame. Nothing unusual. A few shadows, a reflection, a delivery van passing at the edge of the screen. She logged everything anyway. Mercer called it building a map of ghosts. Elaine Morgan sat in the corner of the conference room, holding a photo of Leah from her graduation day. She refused to go home. Every time a phone rang, she looked up with hope that died a little more each time. Mercer kept her updated as gently as he could. He had seen grief before, but not this kind. This was grief that refused to collapse. It stood upright, demanding answers. By the second evening, the case had taken on its own momentum. News vans lined the street near the gallery. Students from the Ontario College of Art and Design gathered with candles, their faces lit by television lights. Some whispered prayers. Others just stared at the alley, as if expecting Leah to appear from it. Then, the first real lead came in. A security guard named Marcus Duval, who worked 2 blocks from the gallery, told police he had seen a black car idling near the alley just before midnight. He noticed it because the driver's door was open and the engine was still running. When he turned his flashlight toward it, the car drove away quickly. He remembered only part of the license plate, 2 letters, and 1 number. That small detail was enough to keep Mercer awake the rest of the night. The next morning, the team traced 16 possible matches. All were checked. 15 belonged to residents with solid alibis. The 16th car, a dark sedan registered to a man named Daniel Cross, drew Patel's attention. He was 44 years old, a professor at Leah's art school, married, well respected. He had reported nothing unusual, but his address was only a few blocks from where Leah disappeared. When Mercer and Patel arrived at his home, Cross greeted them politely. He seemed calm, almost too calm. He said Leah had been one of his best students, talented, serious, and kind. He denied knowing she worked at the gallery that night. Patel asked where he had been between 11 and midnight. Cross smiled faintly and said, "Home. With my wife. She was upstairs asleep." There was no way to confirm his alibi. When they left the house, Mercer glanced back toward the lit window. She vanished in 6 seconds, he said quietly. "Someone made that happen." Patel looked at him and nodded once. The hunt had truly begun. By the third day, Leah Morgan's face was everywhere. Billboards, news tickers, morning shows. Her smile had become the city's obsession. But behind the cameras, the investigation was losing air. Detective Colin Mercer hated press conferences. He stood under the harsh lights as microphones crowded toward him. He repeated what little they knew. Leah left work at 11:42 in the evening. She never reached her car. The search continued. No, they had no suspect. No, they could not confirm the black sedan's involvement. No, they were not giving up. When it was over, reporters swarmed Leah's mother in the parking lot. Elaine's voice cracked as she pleaded for help. "Someone saw something. Please come forward." The clip played on every channel that night. Mercer turned off his television halfway through it. He could not bear to watch the same pain recycled for ratings. Inside the precinct, Detective Aisha Patel went through Leah's phone data again. She noticed that Leah's messaging app had one unsent draft, a text written at 11:41, saved but never sent. It read, "Heading out now. Talk soon. No contact name." Patel traced the last few numbers Leah had dialed. Friends, co-workers, her mother. One call stood out. An incoming number at 10:58 from a private line that lasted 53 seconds. The cell tower pinged less than 1 kilometer from the gallery. The next day, Patel tracked it down. It belonged to a prepaid phone purchased with cash. No name, no registration. It had been used only 3 times before going dark completely. That kind of phone was often used to disappear a conversation. Meanwhile, Mercer interviewed students from Leah's art program. Many spoke about her talent. A few mentioned her mentor, Professor Daniel Cross. He often stayed late in the studio, helping students prepare portfolios. One classmate remembered Leah leaving his office the week before she vanished, looking shaken. "She told me he made her uncomfortable," the student said quietly, "but she didn't want to get him in trouble." That statement hit Mercer hard. He had seen it before. Young women doubting their instincts because the man involved held authority. Still, suspicion was not proof. They brought Cross back in for formal questioning. He sat straight-backed in the interview chair, hands folded neatly. His tone was calm, rehearsed. He said he admired Leah's art, that she reminded him of himself at that age. When Patel asked if their relationship ever crossed a professional line, he smiled thinly. "Of course not. You're looking in the wrong place." His lawyer ended the session after 1 hour. Mercer watched him walk out of the room with quiet confidence and felt something dark twist in his gut. Forensic teams swept the alley again that evening. A fiber, pale blue, was found snagged on a metal grate. It matched the fabric of Leah's gallery uniform. They searched the entire block for traces of blood or struggle but found nothing more. It was as if the rain had washed her clean from the world. Back at home, Mercer sat alone with the case file spread across his kitchen table. The photographs, the map of sightings, the broken phone. He stared at the frozen frame from the security feed. Leah caught mid-step, her hair glistening with rain, her face turning slightly toward the camera as if sensing something behind her. In that silent image, everything ended. He poured another coffee and whispered, "We are missing something right in front of us," and he was right. By the end of the first week, the investigation had stalled. Every lead that looked solid dissolved under pressure. Every theory folded in on itself. The city had already moved on to the next story. But for the team inside the precinct, the silence around Leah Morgan was unbearable. Detective Colin Mercer stood in front of the evidence board. Photographs of Leah. Maps. Phone records. Witness notes. dozens of colored pins connected by red string that no longer made sense. He stared at it for so long that the lines began to blur. Detective Aisha Patel entered the room carrying 2 cups of coffee. She set one down beside him. "Nothing new," she said quietly. "The lab finished the fiber test. It's Leah's uniform, but it doesn't tell us where she went." Mercer nodded. "It just tells us she was there. We already knew that." And he was light to Redding. They worked in silence for a moment before Patel spoke again. "What about Cross?" "Clean," Mercer replied. "No record. Neighbors confirm he was home. His wife backs him up." Patel frowned. His wife also looked terrified. "Yeah," Mercer said softly. "I noticed that too." Later that day, they brought Elaine Morgan back for another interview. She sat at the end of the long table, hands folded tightly together. Mercer asked if Leah had ever mentioned anyone who made her uncomfortable. Elaine shook her head. "No one," she said. "She trusted people too easily." That was always her flaw. At 3 in the afternoon, a new call came in from the public tip line. A man claimed he had seen someone dragging a large plastic bag near the railway tracks 2 nights after Leah disappeared. He could not describe the person clearly. His story changed 3 times before the call ended. Another false lead, but the team checked it anyway. They found nothing. By evening, frustration filled the room. Patel paced between desks. "We are missing something simple," she said. "There has to be a connection between her phone going dark and that car." Mercer looked at the board again. The 6-second gap. The private call. The black sedan. All of it fit together, but the shape of it was wrong, like a puzzle with one piece forced in the wrong place. At midnight, Mercer returned to the alley. Rain had begun to fall again, softer this time. The glow from streetlights painted everything gold. He walked the same path Leah had taken. 10 steps from the gallery door to the corner, 17 more to the streetlight. He stopped. Something caught his eye. A metal maintenance door half hidden behind stacked crates. He had seen it before in photographs, but never in person. It led to the basement of the gallery building. He tried the handle. Locked. A faint smell drifted through the crack in the frame, damp air mixed with something chemical. Paint thinner, maybe. The next morning, Mercer requested access to the basement. The property manager handed him a ring of keys and said the space had not been used in years. When they opened the door, the air hit them like a wave. Dust. Mold. Old wood. The flashlight beams cut through the dark, revealing abandoned crates, broken easels, and a rusted sink streaked with red stains. For a moment, both detectives froze. Then Patel crouched, scraping at one of the stains with a swab. "It's paint," she said, though her voice shook. "At least I think it is." Mercer looked around. "No cameras down here," he said. "Perfect place to hide something." But after 2 hours of searching, they found nothing. No blood. No prints. Just echoes and shadows. As they left, Mercer paused at the bottom of the stairs. "She came through here," he said quietly. "I can feel it." Patel looked back into the darkness and whispered, "Then why can't we see her?" Neither of them had an answer. The next morning began with a burst of hope. A delivery driver had come forward, saying he recognized Leah's face. He claimed he had seen her near the waterfront on the night she disappeared. She was walking fast, holding her phone, talking to someone. The report hit the morning briefing like a spark in dry air. Detective Aisha Patel wanted to believe him. Detective Colin Mercer did not. Still, they followed protocol. They pulled surveillance from every nearby business and cross-checked the timeline. The driver's statement placed Leah at a corner shop at 11:51. The camera feed from that shop showed only reflections of headlights on wet pavement. No Leah. No one who even looked like her. False lead. Again, Patel slammed her pen against the table. "This is going nowhere," she said. "Every time we chase something new, it folds." Mercer leaned back in his chair. "That is what happens when someone wants us to look in the wrong place." That thought stuck with both of them. At noon, forensic analysis from the basement came back. No blood, no DNA, just layers of old paint and solvent. Nothing they could use. But one detail caught Patel's eye. Among the debris, technicians had found a single security tag from an access badge. It was faintly scorched, half melted, but the serial number was still visible. The tag belonged to the Ontario College of Art and Design, specifically to a faculty pass that had expired 2 months before Leah disappeared. The name on the file was Daniel Cross. When confronted with the finding, Cross laughed. "That building was used for student exhibitions," he said. "We all had access passes. You think I planted a badge there years ago?" Mercer stared at him in silence. He had learned long ago that the guilty often fill silence faster than anyone else. Cross kept talking. "If Leah was there, it has nothing to do with me. You are chasing ghosts." Later that evening, Patel visited Leah's apartment. The place was small and neat. Art supplies covered the desk. On the wall hung a corkboard filled with sketches and Polaroids. Most showed empty streets, reflections, and light against glass. A few had handwritten notes along the bottom. One photograph in particular stopped Patel cold. It showed the same alley where Leah vanished, taken from the gallery window. The corner of the maintenance door was visible, and behind it, a figure partly hidden by shadow. The timestamp read October 9th, 2009, 3 days before Leah disappeared. Patel took the photo back to the precinct. Mercer studied it under a magnifier. The figure was tall, wearing a dark jacket. Hard to tell if it was male or female, but something about the posture was deliberate. Watching, not passing by. "We need to know who took this photo," Mercer said. "She did," Patel replied. "It was in her own camera roll." That realization changed everything. Leah had seen someone outside the gallery days before she went missing. She had photographed it, maybe without realizing its importance. Or maybe she had known exactly what she was doing. At 2 in the morning, Mercer called Patel from his apartment. "I keep thinking about that badge," he said. "It was burnt. Why burn plastic unless you want to hide it?" Patel answered quietly. "Maybe someone tried to destroy it after the fact. Someone who went back." For the first time in days, Mercer felt the faint pull of direction. He stood at the window, looking out at the quiet city lights. "We are close," he said, but he was wrong. What waited for them next was not clarity. It was a lie wrapped in truth. By the second week, the case felt like a maze that folded back on itself. Tips kept arriving. None held. The public grew restless. Talk radio lit up with theories. Some blamed the school. Others blamed the police. A few insisted Leah Morgan had run away. Detective Colin Mercer stopped listening. He knew what a staged absence looked like. This was not that. At the precinct, the evidence board had become a dense collage of fragments. The burnt faculty tag tied to Daniel Cross. The photograph Leah took 3 days before she vanished. The 6 silent seconds on the alley camera. Every piece hummed, but none locked into place. Detective Aisha Patel dug into the prepaid phone that called Leah at 10:58 on the night she disappeared. The device had been purchased with cash at a convenience shop on Spadina. No usable camera there, only a recorder that captured sound. Patel pulled the audio and scrubbed through hours of tape. She heard doors opening, a bell, small talk, weather complaints, and then a voice that made her sit up straight. Calm, male, quick and polite. He asked for one prepaid handset and one extra charger. He paid with bills and left. The clerk gave no name. The timestamp matched the purchase time. That was all. Mercer returned to the alley once more. He walked the distance from the gallery door to the corner. He timed each step. 10 seconds to the corner, 20 more to the crosswalk. He pictured a car waiting with the door cracked open. He pictured a hand, a voice, a reason so simple it would be invisible to a stranger. Leah would have followed only if she knew the person, or if the person wore authority like a second skin. Public pressure crested on day 10. A vigil formed outside the gallery. Hundreds held candles that dripped wax onto wet sidewalks. Cameras floated like insects in the light. Elaine Morgan spoke briefly, her voice steady. She said her daughter loved the city and would come home if she could. She asked for one thing, the truth. Then she stepped back and folded into the crowd, as if the only safe place left was inside other people's sorrow. That night a courier dropped an unmarked envelope at the precinct front desk. No return address, no note. Inside was a single photograph, printed on cheap paper. The image showed the alley from a higher angle than any of the known cameras. Leah was visible, head down under her hood, moving past the maintenance door. 3 meters behind her stood a figure. The face was turned away, but the posture was unmistakable. Watching, waiting. The photo was grainy, but the shoulder line matched the silhouette in Leah's earlier Polaroid. Patel checked the paper and the ink. Home printer, common brand, nothing to trace. Mercer asked who could have captured that angle. The property manager said there was no camera up there. The gallery said the same. So who took it? They canvassed the adjacent building. A yoga studio on the 2nd floor. A small framing shop on the 3rd. Both had front windows only. No rear view. The 4th floor had been unoccupied for years. The fire door was chained from the inside. A lock specialist met them there and cut through the chain. The metal clattered and echoed down the stairwell like a warning. Dust lay thick across the 4th floor. Old plaster, abandoned desks, a line of empty frames leaned against a wall. Near the back, a single window looked down into the alley. A tripod stood beside it. Fresh scuff marks ringed its feet on the floor. Patel opened a drawer in a nearby desk. Inside, she found a memory card case with one slot empty. In the wastebasket, she found a strip of test prints, each one an exposure of the alley at night. The strip ended with a half-image of Leah's hood. The rest had been torn away. Mercer felt his pulse rise. He watched from here, he said. He planned the angle. He waited. They dusted the tripod and the desk. 2 partial prints surfaced on the metal clasp of the case. The lab called back at dawn. One print was smudged beyond use. The other returned a hit. Not Daniel Cross. A different name entirely. Henry Cross. Patel read the file. Construction foreman. Older brother of Daniel. No criminal record. Lived in a narrow house less than 3 kilometers from the gallery. Owned a white panel van registered to his company. Worked irregular late hours on interior renovations across the downtown core. Mercer stared at the match. The name settled over the room like new weather. If the brother watched, he said, the professor did not need to. Patel nodded slowly. two roles, one who lures, one who waits. They looked again at the timeline, the prepaid call, the 6 silent seconds, the black car that might have been a dark van in rain, a faculty tag burned and left to rot, a window on a forgotten floor. For the first time since Leah vanished, the path ahead looked straight. They had a new door to open, and, behind it, the first honest turn in the case. Henry Cross lived on Weston Road, in a narrow red brick house squeezed between 2 warehouses. From the outside it looked ordinary, the kind of home that disappears in a blur when you drive past. A small porch light glowed above the door, even in daylight. His neighbors said he kept to himself. Quiet, polite. Never caused trouble. Detective Colin Mercer and Detective Aisha Patel arrived just after 7 in the morning. The sky hung low with fog. A white van was parked in the driveway, streaked with mud and old paint. The license plate matched the partial description from the first week. Henry opened the door in work clothes, holding a mug of coffee. He seemed more confused than alarmed. "Can I help you?" Mercer showed his badge. "We need to ask a few questions about your brother, Daniel." Henry's face changed, but only slightly. "We just need to confirm some details," Patel said. Inside, the house smelled of plaster dust and coffee. Tools were neatly lined along the hallway. The walls were freshly painted, except for one patch near the staircase where primer still showed. A radio played softly from another room. They talked for nearly 20 minutes. Henry said Daniel had been under stress. He mentioned the investigation, called it a misunderstanding. He said he barely saw his brother these days. When Mercer asked about the white van, Henry said he used it for work, renovating homes in the West End. "Anyone else have access to it?" Patel asked. "No, just me." "Where was it on the night of October 12th? 2009. Henry hesitated. "Probably in the garage." "I was home. My wife was visiting her sister." Patel's eyes met Mercer's for a brief second. That hesitation said everything. When they requested permission to search the property, Henry laughed softly. "You have a warrant for that?" "Not yet," Mercer said. "But we can get one." Henry's smile faded. "Then I suggest you do." He walked them to the door, calm again, polite again. As Mercer stepped outside, he noticed something strange. Near the edge of the porch, a dark stain ran down into the concrete, like water that never dried. It looked old, but the color was wrong. Back at the precinct, Mercer pushed for a warrant. The discovery of fingerprints in the abandoned building gave them just enough cause. By sunset, a team was assembled. The warrant arrived at 9:42 that night. They entered quietly. The house was still. The radio had been turned off. In the basement, they found shelves of paint cans, tools, and cleaning chemicals. Against the far wall stood a stack of cement bags, half used. Patel's flashlight passed over them and stopped. A faint line cut across the concrete floor, perfectly straight, running from wall to wall. The surface looked newer than the surrounding foundation. Mercer knelt and tapped it with the edge of a wrench. The sound was different. Hollow. "Call forensics," he said. The team began to break the surface. Each strike echoed through the house. The smell that rose from the crack was thick and sweet. Patel turned away, hand over her mouth. Under the first layer of concrete was a tarp. Under the tarp was what they had been looking for since the beginning. The remains were fragile, wrapped carefully in layers of fabric. A small silver necklace was still clasped around the neck. The charm was a tiny circle engraved with the letter L. Leah Morgan had been found. For a moment, no one spoke. Mercer stood motionless, eyes fixed on the dark floor. Then he exhaled slowly and said, "Call her mother." Elaine Morgan arrived 3 hours later, escorted by officers. She stood at the edge of the driveway, staring at the police lights that painted her daughter's name across the night. Patel walked to her, careful, quiet. "We found her," she said. Elaine nodded, but her face did not change. "I already knew," she whispered. "I just did not know where." Inside the house, technicians continued to work. Among the tools they found a heavy wrench marked with dried residue. It was wrapped in a rag that smelled faintly of bleach. Mercer looked at it and knew. The story that had haunted Toronto for 12 years was no longer a mystery. It was murder. The basement on Weston Road became a laboratory of truth. Forensic teams worked through the night. They photographed every inch, lifted prints from metal and painted wood, and logged the sequence of layers above the grave. Concrete, tarp, fabric, then bone. The medical examiner arrived at first light. She spoke softly, as if the room could hear her. Within 24 hours, the first results landed on Detective Aisha Patel's desk. The necklace was confirmed as Leah Morgan's. Elaine identified it from a purchase receipt and a photograph taken the summer before she vanished. The concrete sample matched a commercial mix supplied to 3 construction sites run by Henry Cross in the year of the disappearance. A hair fragment recovered from inside the tarp carried a partial mitochondrial profile, consistent with Leah's maternal line. It was not yet a full match, but the direction was clear. Detective Colin Mercer studied the wrench found on the basement shelf. The lab recovered trace biological material in the teeth and along the handle. The sample was degraded, but not empty. Under the microscope, it yielded enough to compare against Leah's profile once the bone analysis was complete. Toolmark experts also documented the geometry of the head. They said if the skull showed a patterned fracture, they could likely align the curve of the metal to the injury. By late afternoon, the medical examiner called. Cause of death was blunt force trauma to the left temporal region, a single catastrophic blow. The fracture pattern suggested a heavy adjustable wrench used with force. There were no defensive wounds. That meant surprise or restraint. The examiner could not tell which. Time since death fit the night Leah vanished. Mercer and Patel split the interviews. Mercer took Henry. Patel took Daniel. Henry sat in a small gray room with his hands folded tightly together. He asked for water. He did not ask for a lawyer. At first he talked about work. He talked about schedules, tools, and invoices, as if numbers could shield him. Mercer let him talk until the words ran dry. Then he placed the photograph from the 4th-floor window on the table. The alley, the tripod angle, Leah's hood, the silhouette behind her. "We found your fingerprint on the memory card case," Mercer said. Henry stared at the image, then closed his eyes. "I watched from that window," he said quietly. "I wanted to keep her safe. That is what my brother told me. Watch and make sure she reached her car." That was all. Mercer did not speak. Silence has its own gravity. It pulls the rest of the truth to the surface. Henry swallowed. "I followed her earlier that week, only for a block. Daniel said she was worried about a man near the gallery. He said a presence on the street might help." He paused. "I should have known better." Patel faced Daniel in a second room. He arrived with a lawyer and a look of measured injury. He said he was devastated for the family. He said he had nothing to do with the basement. He said he had never set foot on Weston Road. When Patel asked about the burnt faculty tag recovered under the gallery, he smiled without warmth. "Those passes were everywhere," he said. You cannot hang a case on a piece of melted plastic. Patel slid a printout across the table. It was the audio analysis from the convenience shop microphone on Spadina. The voice that purchased the prepaid phone was compared against recordings from Daniel's lectures found online. The report did not claim certainty, but it noted a high probability of match based on cadence, vowel length, and consonant pressure. Daniel's lawyer objected. Probabilistic voice work is not a positive identification. Patel agreed out loud. Then she placed a second document beside it. The prepaid handset had connected to a tower near Daniel's office at 10:56 on the night of the call to Leah. 2 minutes later, it connected to a tower near the gallery. That movement mapped to a car driving the short route south. Back in the first room, Henry began to bend. Mercer laid out the concrete mix receipt, the wrench, and the tarp. He spoke without heat. He said the grave was careful and recent at the time of burial. He said the bleach proved knowledge of how evidence degrades. He said the person who poured that floor had done it before. Henry whispered, "I buried her. I did not kill her." The words fell like a stone. Daniel called me after midnight. He said there had been an accident. He was shaking. I drove the van. We wrapped her. We sealed the floor. 3 days later, I finished the pour. He lifted his head. I am not the man who swung the wrench. Patel watched Daniel closely as she relayed Henry's statement over the intercom. A flicker moved across his face, then vanished. He asked for a break. He did not get one. "Did you meet Leah that night?" Patel asked. "Or did you wait at the alley while someone else brought her to you?" Daniel leaned back and stared at the ceiling. "I met her to talk about a scholarship," he said at last. She became upset. She fell. Patel shook her head. "A fall does not leave a patterned fracture that fits your brother's wrench." The first confession belonged to Henry. The first lie that collapsed belonged to Daniel. Outside the interview rooms, Mercer and Patel stood side by side. The hallway felt colder than the rooms themselves. They did not celebrate. They did not speak for a long moment. Then Mercer said, "We are past theory." Patel nodded. "Now we take them both." The next morning, the air inside the station was heavy. 2 brothers sat in 2 separate rooms, divided by concrete and 20 years of secrets. Daniel Cross, the professor with calm eyes and folded hands. Henry Cross, the builder whose silence finally cracked. Detective Colin Mercer watched both rooms on the surveillance screen, flipping between the feeds. He knew that somewhere between them, the whole truth waited. At 9:15, Daniel's lawyer arrived. He wanted both brothers kept apart. The request came too late. Henry had already confessed to the burial. He had also described Daniel's call that night, the panic, the blood, and the order to bring the van. That statement changed everything. Mercer stepped into Henry's room first. Henry looked pale, his shoulders slumped, hands trembling slightly around a paper cup of water. "Did you ever see her alive?" Mercer asked. Henry shook his head. "No. When I arrived, she was already gone, wrapped in a sheet. He told me it was an accident. He said he needed my help to make it disappear. I believed him." Mercer leaned forward. "Why help him?" Henry stared at the wall. "Because he was my brother. Because when you grow up cleaning after someone's mistakes, you forget where the line is." Mercer let those words hang. Then he stood and left. In the next room, Detective Aisha Patel sat across from Daniel. The lawyer sat beside him, silent for now. Patel placed a photograph of Leah on the table. "She was your student," Patel said. "Yes," Daniel replied. "She was talented. She trusted you." "I hope so." Patel leaned closer. She told a friend you made her uncomfortable. Daniel smiled faintly. That is a cruel thing to say about a dead girl. Patel did not flinch. She is not the one on trial yet. You are. She placed another photo beside the first. The wrench. Then another. The concrete floor. The tarp. Daniel's expression hardened. Henry did this, he said. You have his confession. Patel replied. He confessed to burying her, not killing her. Daniel's lawyer finally spoke. This interview is over. Patel ignored him. You called Leah from a prepaid phone. You told her to meet you at the gallery. You used her trust to get her alone. When she refused you, you lost control. One blow. That is all it took. Daniel looked directly at her. You think you know, but you don't. You are building a story because it feels right. That is not proof. Patel stood. No, she said, but your brother's fingerprints on the camera case are proof. The voice recording is evidence. The wrench with your lab's tool stamp is proof. The rest is just time catching up with you. Outside, Mercer watched the exchange on the monitor. The professor's control was slipping, inch by inch. He called Patel through the intercom. Hold him there. I want him to hear the news. 2 minutes later, Mercer entered the room carrying a small evidence bag. Inside was a memory card recovered from the 4th-floor building, found the day before. Forensics had extracted fragments of deleted files. One video clip had survived. He placed the laptop on the table and pressed play. The footage showed the alley from above, dim and grainy. Leah's figure appeared, walking quickly, phone in hand. Then another shape stepped into frame. Tall, dark coat. The face was partly visible for 1 second, as the light from a street lamp caught it. Daniel Cross looked at himself on screen. He exhaled once, long and slow. His lawyer whispered for him not to speak. Daniel looked up at Mercer. She said no, he murmured. I panicked. I did not mean to hit her that hard. It was only supposed to stop her from screaming. The room went silent. Patel turned off the video. What did you do next? She asked. I called Henry, Daniel said. He owed me. He always owed me. He pressed his palms together as if in prayer. I thought if no one found her, she could stay perfect, untouched, like her paintings. Mercer closed the file. You buried her for 12 years. That is not perfection. That is rot. As Daniel was led from the room in handcuffs, his eyes passed over the camera lens. For a brief second he smiled, as if proud of being remembered. Mercer watched him go and felt nothing but exhaustion. Down the hall, Henry sat with his head in his hands. He did not look up when Mercer entered. Is he talking? He asked. Yes, Mercer said. And he gave you the rest of your life in prison to think about it. Outside the station, the first snow of the year began to fall. It melted as it touched the ground, washing the city clean, at least for a moment. The arraignment drew a line across Toronto. On one side stood those who had waited for justice. On the other stood those who insisted the system had already decided. Cameras crowded the courthouse steps. Microphones bloomed like flowers after rain. When Daniel Cross was led inside in a pale suit and thin tie, the crowd surged forward as if history could be touched. Prosecutors moved quickly. The charges were announced in a calm voice that did not match the weight of the words. First-degree murder, indignity to human remains, obstruction. Henry Cross faced separate counts. Accessory after the fact, obstruction, possession of tools used in a violent offense. The brothers did not look at each other. They had not done so since the confessions. Inside the courtroom, the gallery filled in minutes. Reporters scribbled. Former students whispered. Leah's peers from the art school sat in a tight row, hands linked, eyes on the defense table. Elaine Morgan sat near the aisle with Detective Aisha Patel at the end of the bench, a quiet anchor. Detective Colin Mercer stood at the back for a long time before taking a seat near the aisle, close enough to leave if he needed air. The prosecution opened with the path that began on Queen Street. They told the jury about the last shift, the 6 silent seconds on the camera, the prepaid phone that traveled from Daniel's office to the gallery, the window on the forgotten 4th floor, the tripod, the memory card, the wrench with trace material, the concrete recipe that matched Henry's projects from that year. They did not overreach. They stacked stones until the shape of a wall appeared. The defense advanced a different picture. They said the 4th floor was a public place. They said prints are not intent. They said voice comparison is not a signature. They said a mentor can be framed by those who resent success. They suggested that Henry could have killed Leah alone and used his brother as a shield. They offered alternative timelines in gentle tones, the way a stage magician offers choices he never intends to honor. Public reaction split along familiar seams. Talk shows argued about power and privilege. Comment sections filled with people who claimed they had always known or who insisted the police wanted a trophy. Former students told stories about Daniel's praise that sometimes lingered too long. Others defended him as demanding but fair. At night, vigils formed again near the gallery. Candles, photos, a poem printed on thin paper that curled in the damp. The city was not only watching a trial, it was trying to understand itself. On the 3rd day, Elaine took the stand. Her voice was steady. She spoke about Leah's careful routines, her love for evening walks, her habit of texting before she left work. She described the necklace with the small circle and the letter L. When the prosecutor asked what she wanted from the court, she said only 3 words, the full truth. Then she stepped down and sat very still, as if any motion might spill what she had kept contained for 12 years. Forensics followed. The medical examiner explained the fracture in plain language. 1 blow. Left temporal region. Immediate loss of consciousness. Likely death within minutes. The tool geometry aligned with the wrench from the Weston Road basement. The probability that another common tool had created the same pattern was described as extremely low. Then came the footage. The overhead view of the alley played in silence. The jurors leaned forward. For 1 second, the light caught a face beside Leah. It was enough. Not absolute, not perfect, but enough to marry the narrative to the frame. During cross-examination, Daniel kept his eyes lowered. His lawyer asked slow questions about doubt and burden and the meaning of proof. The rhythm worked for a while. Then the prosecutor asked a single question that cut through the fog. Why purchase a prepaid phone the same night you met a student after hours? There was no answer that sounded like innocence. Henry testified last for the prosecution under a cooperation agreement that guaranteed nothing. He spoke without drama. He said he poured concrete because he had spent a lifetime fixing what his brother broke. He said that this time there was no repair, only a burial that had poisoned his sleep for 12 years. When asked why he had not come forward, he said he feared the end of his family. Then he looked at Elaine and said he finally understood what an end truly is. When court adjourned that day, the steps outside felt like a stage. People argued about guilt, about complicity, about who gets believed and when. A light snow fell and melted on contact. Mercer stood beneath the eaves and watched the crowd thin. He did not feel triumph. He felt the slow settling of weight where certainty takes root. Tomorrow the jury would begin to deliberate. Toronto held its breath. The courthouse was silent, except for the rain tapping against the tall windows. 12 jurors filed in, faces pale, eyes fixed forward. Every movement felt rehearsed by fear. The air carried the weight of 12 years of waiting. Detective Colin Mercer stood at the back of the room, hands clasped, heart steady but not calm. He had seen verdicts before, but never one that reached so far into the city's memory. Daniel Cross sat between his lawyers, his suit pressed, his posture unbroken. Henry sat 2 rows behind, flanked by officers, his hands shaking in his lap. Across the aisle, Elaine Morgan held a tissue she had not used. She was not crying. Her grief had hardened into something quieter. Beside her, Detective Aisha Patel whispered, "Whatever happens now, it ends today." The clerk read the verdicts in a voice that never rose or fell. On the charge of first-degree murder, guilty. On the charge of indignity to human remains, guilty. On the charge of obstruction of justice, guilty. Daniel did not flinch. He blinked once, then stared straight ahead, as if the words were data and not destiny. Henry bowed his head. Elaine exhaled a single breath that sounded like a release she had practiced for years. The judge thanked the jury and began to speak about premeditation, about the abuse of trust, about a victim who had no defense except her faith in decency. He spoke about a brother who chose loyalty over conscience, and another who built a tomb beneath his own floor. He spoke about silence as complicity. When he finished, he sentenced Daniel Cross to life imprisonment without parole for 25 years. Henry received 20 years for accessory after the fact. The gavel struck once, and it was over. Outside, the sky had cleared. Reporters shouted questions as the crowd poured from the steps. Cameras flashed. Sound bites formed before the words even cooled. Art professor convicted. 12-year mystery solved. Justice for Leah. Elaine did not stop to answer. She walked through the noise like someone moving through a dream, clutching the silver pendant that once belonged to her daughter. Patel followed a few steps behind, making sure no one pressed too close. Mercer stayed inside. He sat alone in the now empty courtroom, staring at the defense table. The chair Daniel had used was slightly turned toward the jury box, as if even now he wanted to be seen. Mercer thought about the first night at the alley, about the rain, about the sound of his own boots on the wet ground. He thought about the 6 missing seconds that had haunted him for more than a decade. Those seconds were no longer missing. They were accounted for. Yet the relief felt hollow. Later that evening, he and Patel drove to the Trinity Square Gallery. The building had been closed since the verdict. The air inside was still, the lights dim. They walked the same corridor Leah once did. Mercer stopped by the back door, where the camera had failed. "This is where she disappeared," he said quietly. Patel nodded. "And this is where we found her again." Outside, the rain began to fall once more, soft and steady. They stood there for a long time, neither speaking. The case was over, but something in the air felt unfinished, like a note held too long. When they finally left, Mercer turned off his recorder and looked at Patel. "Some cases don't end," he said. "They just stop making noise." Patel slipped the key back to the property manager. "Then maybe silence is the only kind of peace people like us get." As they walked away, the gallery light flickered once, reflecting in the puddles where Leah had last been seen. The city swallowed the sound of the rain, and for the first time in 12 years, Toronto slept. Leah Morgan's story is not only about what was lost, it is about what was finally uncovered, the truth hidden beneath concrete, silence, and time. Every solved case begins with one person who refuses to stop asking questions. Elaine never stopped. Neither should we. If stories like this matter to you, subscribe, share, and stay with us, because somewhere, another family is still waiting for their truth to surface, and the next answer might begin with you.